I want you to take your browser to supertalktv.com today. You'll see I'm not alone. I have with me Miss Jenny Anderson. She's a New York-based freelance photographer. She has a degree from the University of Southern Miss in journalism. And boy, is she up to some pretty cool and good things. So welcome, Jenny.
Hi, how are you?
I have to tell on myself, before I had enough coffee this morning, I read through my notes and I thought, I get to talk to Jennifer Aniston today. And I knew it wasn't like the real Jennifer Aniston. But then I went back and I was like, Jenny Anderson, Rebecca, have another cup of coffee.
I mean, I'll take it.
But there's chances you may have photographed her or could in the future. So I'm just throwing that out there for you.
I gotta say, I haven't photographed her, but I would love to. That'd be great. Not yet. There we go.
Not yet. Right. I love that your story, it says that you grew up wanting to be a doctor. So how does someone, a young kid who grows up, aspiring to be in the healthcare and a doctor, wind up, on Broadway behind the scenes as a photographer?
Right. I think the wanting to be the doctor part, I was really into the romantic side of that, like the connection with other people and taking care of other people. And so I just thought naturally I should be a doctor. And I was really into ER back in the 90s. And so I had this romantic notion of what a doctor was, which I highly respect, but I think it was a little too much schooling for me. But I think I just took a different route of connecting with humans and maybe not taking care of them, but healing them in a different way and connecting with them in a more artistic way and taking photos of them and capturing their lives and being a part of their world for a brief time, but hopefully an important moment. So I took a very big detour. I did go to college for a couple of years and took some A&P classes and some sciences, and like pre-med was my track. And then I was like really just distracted by being in theater, and I was on the yearbook staff and the newspaper staff, and I was like, clearly maybe I don't want to be a doctor because I'm so focused on this other part of my my life. So I changed I finished 2 years of college and then I changed my major because I was like, I clearly want a different path. So I was at Jones Junior College first doing that, and then switched and went to Ole Miss after that.
Which I want to get to, but I totally connect with the romanticizing of a different profession. I watched Ally McBeal growing up and wanted to be a lawyer. I thought that they got to wear pretty clothes and holler at people. And that was...
Sure, exactly. And I was actually watching ER today because it's on TV, and I was like, this is it. They're just like so connected with the person, and they take care of them. And also maybe they like fall in love with the doctor next to them or something like that. But I quickly found out that probably wasn't the realistic doctor
and
scenario.
There's way more paperwork to being a lawyer. They do way more paperwork than they do actually wear cute shoes. So I totally get that though, sort of influencing you at a young age. But one thing that did stick for you, Jenny, as a young age was your photography, your camera. So even though you had the dreams of being McSteamy's, sidekick, or I guess that's not even ER.
I was a Grey's fan too. It's fine. It was all there.
It was all there. You were taking photos. So in the early days, when you were a kiddo with your camera, what were you snapping pictures of?
So my dad is an art teacher and an artist, and he kind of led me down the photography path. He used to share books with me, Margaret Burke White and Adora Welty and all these women who took photos of like rural life. And that's the life that I lived around too. I'm from middle of nowhere, Mississippi. And so I grew up with old people on porches and my grandpa in the fields, and because my grandfather was a farmer, and my Mimi in her garden. And so those are the things I took photos of, and capturing those real life moments with these real people. And so that was the beginning of it. And then it shifted into more of the art side, which my mom is a theater teacher, and I grew up just loving musical theater specifically. So I kind of just married their worlds together because I loved theater so much and thought I wanted to be an actor or a singer, performer. And I quickly learned to have stage fright and also just my talent lied with the camera, not with the singing and dancing. I loved it so much, though. I still wanted it to be a part of my life. So I just combined the two and still took from what I learned from those women and from my dad, and still, I think, take photos of theater in the same way I took photos of rural life, just a different subject, but still in a more journalistic way.
Bring up the point, Jenny, that you can still have a career in the things that you love or you're passionate about. It doesn't have to mean necessarily you're the front one on the stage or the necessarily, whether it's the film industry, which is, really booming right now in Mississippi. There's all kinds of really cool jobs behind the scenes, even to writing the scripts.
Absolutely.
Just because you are interested in a certain artistic area doesn't mean that there's not a spot for you to sort of live out your dreams or purpose, or sort of still have a position there, even if it's not on the, on the when the curtain rises, because that would terrify me.
Absolutely.
as well.
Yeah.
Well, you want me to sing and dance and look at the audience and remember lines and do all those things? Too much.
Too much. Well, I've talked to a couple of classes, or I get DMs a lot about advice of like, how do I do this? Where do I go? And I always tell people, look, just because you love something and you may not be as good at it as you think you should be, or you don't feel like there's a place for you, there's probably a place for you. Just like keep finding what that is, like keep doing it. Because I did think I wanted to sing and be on stage like my mom, and then I realized, nope, that's not it. But I love it so much. I got to figure out where I fit in this, because I want it to be a part of my life. And I was just lucky to find that I was good at photography, and I was able to stay in the theater world by doing that. But yeah, behind the scenes, in the house, there's so many different things in theater and film and television, and there's thousands and thousands of jobs. You don't have to be the leading actor, even though, I'm sure that's fun too. But
that's fun. It has its place. And you know what? The stars aren't through writing your story, Jenny. You may wind up, on there before the end. But you talk about those opportunities, or you can call it luck, or I like to think of luck as, preparedness meets opportunity. I think that's a good way of looking at it as well. When you did switch from Jones Junior College and then you went to Ole Miss, or University of Mississippi, you switched there to journalism, which I think is interesting.
Right.
So what drew you to the Department of Journalism?
So I think I had a super practical brain most of my life, and still do. But I think when I went to college to be a doctor, it was the romantic side, but it was also like, this is a real job with potentially good money at the end of it. And being an artist and a photographer, that sounded so scary to me. I was like, can you be a photographer as a job? Is that a thing? Which sounds like silly and ignorant to say that now. But then, I just kind of was told, you go to school, you get a job, and you make money. And being an artist was, and I had two artist parents, but both of my artist parents were school teachers. So they also had a practical job. And I think once I decided I wanted to switch to being a photographer, I was like, I still need to find something that has definitely has a job at the end of it, which, whether journalism definitely has a job at the end of it or not, at that time, I thought that was a practical way to go. And I did always want to go to Ole Miss. I had I've loved Ole Miss since I was a kid. We always watched Ole Miss football, and none of my family ever went there though. And I was going to be the first one to go. And I knew their journalism department was just opening this big, beautiful media center that year. And I was drawn to that school and that department. And I got in, and I was just like, well, journalism is kind of a perfect middle to what I do. Like, I am definitely more of a journalistic photographer, even though it is theater and Broadway that I'm interested in. Like I said before, the women that I was aspiring to be were journalists, were photojournalists. So that's why I picked that degree. And then once I got there, the education I got was amazing, because the media center, I worked at a daily paper. We put a paper out every single day, 5 days a week. And I still say that that's the hardest I've worked ever. And I've been doing this for about 15 years now. And I still remember those late nights and getting the paper out by the morning, so all the students had it. So it was an incredible experience to have.
And it's definitely paying off because you got welcomed back to Ole Miss for an event, which we're going to get to, and more with Jenny, not Jennifer, Jenny Anderson coming up next. We're finding out more about Jenny Anderson. She's a New York-based freelance photographer. She has a degree from the University of Southern Miss. That's where I'm from, University of Mississippi in journalism. But you could have gotten your good degree there too, but we won't take it away from Ole Miss. And it's come full circle for you. You now have a photo exhibit at the Ford Center for the Performing Arts on campus or in Oxford, and that's where you got your start, sort of combining your love of photography with your love of performance. So, what was your first assignment? Do you remember? Because I think it was while you were working for the newspaper, the Daily Mississippian. Do you remember that first time you kind of got to use both talents?
Well, first off, my mom went to Southern, so we've covered all the universities. My mom went to Southern, my dad went to State, and I went to Ole Miss. So, you know what? It wasn't really an assignment so much as I did get a lot of assignments there. But once I became the photo editor, which was my last year there, my senior year, it was technically a super senior because I went to school for 5 years. But I became the photo editor, and I really, like I said before, I really love theater, and I wanted to cover theater more because we didn't really cover it that much. And my best friend was the Arts and Life editor. He also was a big theater fan. So we were like, let's combine our love and let's cover the theater department more. So he would write reviews and I would take photos of the production. So we'd have photos to go along with his reviews. And we did that the whole year. So their whole season, we covered them from top to bottom. And that's really where it started. And I was shooting the production, but a part of me really wanted to get backstage and shoot like the cool nitty gritty stuff that you don't get to see when you go and see the show. You don't see how it's made, so I went to some of the professors and was like, is it cool if I go backstage? And at that point I'd become friends with a lot of the students in the theater department, and they're like, yeah, sure, if the students are okay with it. So I went backstage, and my first backstage photo I ever took was one of my really good friends, Haley Strode, who actually lives in LA and is an actress now. And that photo is in the opening of our yearbook. It's standalone as you open the first few pages. And that was it for me. That really sparked it. And I was like, this is it. This is what I want to do. And since I was a kid, I always wanted to live in New York, but I was like, Broadway is where I need to be. And I now know why I need to be there. It's to take photos like this. So
well, you aren't the only kid or student interested in theater that's like, yes, Broadway is where I feel like, the stage is calling me. But, very few actually make it there and then make a career out of it. So how did you go from Oxford to New York and actually land a job doing what it is you set your intention to? Because to me, that's the coolest part of this whole story. You set an intention and then it just manifested itself into reality, which is a really cool job.
I was pretty tenacious about it. Again, a tiny part of my practical brain was like, you can't go to New York if you don't have a job. That's just crazy. You can't just show up, even though plenty of people do it. That's kind of the place to do it. New York, you just jump off the plane and get right into it. But I was like, well, if I get a job, that's where I'll go. And I pretty much applied for 100 jobs across the country, every major city I could think of, staying in the journalism world and the photography world. But whether it was print or digital or anything. But the only job offer I received over the phone was to be a souvenir photographer for Circle Line cruises in Manhattan, which is not very fancy. Respectable. It was a job. They were like, if you get here in 2 weeks, this job is yours. And basically it was me standing outside in front of a boat, taking photos of tourists before they got on that boat and took a tour around Manhattan. And then when they got off the boat, I sold them the photos. So not glamorous and not what I intended my career to be, but it got me to New York. I sold my car, packed 2 suitcases, bought a one-way plane ticket, that cost $94 actually in 2007. And I literally got off the plane, went to my friend's house and started my job the next day. And for about 2 weeks, I like worked, but also looked for a real job and looked for an apartment. And the same day I found the apartment I moved into, I found an internship for Broadway.com, a photo internship. And I was like, this is it. This is literally made for me. Whoever put this in front of me, divine intervention or whatever. I was like, okay, I applied for that job. I went in for it, and I had a portfolio of theater photos that I had taken at Ole Miss. And I was like, this is what I want to do for you guys. This is what I can do. And I will say I didn't get a call back for that job for about 3 or 4 weeks. But I was, like I said, very tenacious. And I pretty much called that editor in chief, I want to say called him every day or emailed him every day for about 3 weeks. I was like, hi, it's me again, Jenny from Mississippi. Like, I really want this job. Turns out he was on vacation, so he just wasn't responding. But when he got back and saw all of my messages, he wasn't scared of me, which is great. And instead hired me, and that, as they say, is history from there on. And I was there for about 6 years. I was a photo intern for 6 months. And then after 6 months, again, kind of a lucky thing, the photo editor quit because he was an actor and he had gotten a job. And so he left. And I was this lone intern that had only been working there for 6 months. And they were like, well, you're here and you know how it goes. So we're now shoving you into his position. Yeah, good luck. Here you go. And I didn't get his title quite or his money yet, but I did get a lot of his responsibilities. And that turned into 6 years and just taking photos of everything from on the red carpets to meet and greets to backstage to performances, just top to bottom, Broadway, off Broadway, everything. And then 6 years after that, I became a freelancer. I quit and went out on my own.
Jenny, I saw a piece not too long ago about the photographer at the White House, and I can't remember the man's name, but I think he just retired, and he had shot like seven administrations or something like that. And I thought, what a cool job, and it's very similar to what you do, to be backstage, to kind of blend in, and you catch people in their most authentic selves and most authentic moments, gearing up for, a performance or a job of a lifetime. Do you feel, do you ever get the feeling that they forgot that you were there? Was that kind of the point, was to sort of be forgotten, but catch the moments, right? Because it's not staged, it's live action. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Is it kind of like you kind of get to be the little ghost between behind the scenes?
Yeah. For sure. His name is Pete Souza, and I'm obsessed with him. He's so cool. That's my other dream job, is to follow a president or a vice president, if that were. So in the beginning, it definitely was that. And I don't like a whole lot of attention on myself. Actually, this radio interview is real great, so people don't have to see me. But I tend to stick to the corners and in the quiet spots so they don't know that I'm there. But I will say, in the last 6 or 7 years of being a freelancer and out on my own, the Broadway community is very small. Like, you think it isn't because you see it from a distance and it looks like this big grand thing, but it's very small and kind of everybody knows each other. And I've gotten to a point in my career where I know so many people, it makes those moments even easier to capture. They still tend to forget that I'm there sometimes, but they also are just so much more comfortable because we know each other and we have a history, and they know that I'm not going to try to capture anything that they don't want me to capture. Right. I'm going to be sensitive to because a lot of actors in those moments, those are the moments right before they go on stage. So they're getting into character and calming themselves, their head and their heart, and they're trying to get into a place of where I'm about to be on stage for 2 hours and deliver this either super dramatic or super intense performance or happy performance, wherever they need to get. So I try not to invade that space, that headspace for them too much, but because they know me and I have a relationship with them, they tend to calm down, and I'm always around. So I think they're used to me now. But in the earlier days, yes, being quiet and kind of sticking to the corners made for better photos for sure.
And obviously that trust component definitely lends itself to the most authentic pictures as well. Anybody who has children and they're trying to get a picture of them, if they trust the photographer, it's going to work out so much better than some scary
for sure.
man with a beard or, in terms of Santa or the Easter Bunny that's coming up or whatever it may be. But your story doesn't end there, Jenny. You came back home. You decided, and I love this too, just that internal, connection to whatever should be next for you, or growing as your own sort of artist, that you are able to listen to and take those opportunities or those steps So you hitched a flight back home. Did it cost you more than
Yeah.
$94 to get back home, or?
I actually drove
Oh.
this time because I drove all my photos down, all framed and matted, and there was 45 of them, so I had to put them in a car and bring them down. But yeah,
well, we're going to
the
get
South.
to that
That's
part.
Oh, gotta come back.
Of Jenny's story. Yeah, we got to come back.
Yep.
That's part of Jenny's story coming up next. And if you're in Oxford, stop by the Ford Center for the Performing Arts. You can catch the in-between, intimate and candid moments of Broadway stars, which highlights photos of Jenny Anderson's, our guest today on Good Things, backstage experience while she worked for Broadway.com. So what was it like when you knew that it was all going to come full circle and the Ford Center, Jenny was going to, put your work up as a returning artist to Mississippi?
I love that you use that song, by the way. That's my good friend Kayala, who's also a Broadway star. And so I love hearing her sing that song. So it was very surreal and lovely. So my former professor, Ellen Meacham, who was also our advisor for the paper when I worked there. So she was at the beginning of my career. She reached out to me. Her sister works at the Ford Center, and she reached out to me. And she's like, would you be interested in putting up a show? My sister was asking me, and I was like, yeah, sure. That'd be awesome. It's certainly something I've been thinking about for a while, wanting to get my work out there in terms of a gallery show or a book, and having the first one of that, because I haven't really had any of that yet. I've had my work published a lot, but I've never had a show before. Having my first one in my hometown, I say my hometown, I wasn't actually raised here, but I take it as my hometown because this is where my parents live. But having it in my college town and on my campus was just an incredible honor, and where I began my career as a photographer in theater. And the night that we had the opening, a bunch of my professors came, and all my college best friends were there. My mom was there. It was just this full circle wild moment, and I felt a little bit like having a Broadway opening, but with me instead of Broadway stars. Had people coming up to me and asking questions, and it was just a wild night, but it was very cool and surreal, and I'm just honored to have it there.
Jenny, how long will it be there? I know that was January the 28th, so it's been a little bit.
Yeah, so a little bit. They want to keep it for the semester. There's actually some movement right now and talk about moving it to New York, hopefully, but that hasn't been set in stone, so we don't know yet. We're still looking for some spots, but that would be great. But for now, it should be there all semester, and the Ford Center is open to anybody just to walk in and look at it. And of course, the Ford Center has shows there, so you can go early, look at the show, and then go sit down and actually watch a show. Musicals and different concerts and stuff go through there. So it was a really good fit to have Broadway photography in that space.
You were educated in Oxford, but where were you raised in Mississippi?
Mm-hmm. So we kind of raised all over. I went to 8th grade through high school in Brooklyn, Mississippi. So my formative years were in super South Mississippi. Brooklyn is, if you don't know it, it's a very teeny tiny little community between Hattiesburg and Wiggins or the Gulf Coast. So that's where I was for those years. And then before that, I went to, I think, 7 different schools in my 12-year school life. We were just a little unsettled and moved a lot. But after Hurricane Katrina, my parents moved from South Mississippi up to Oxford, and they've been in Oxford ever since. So that's why I tend to call it my hometown, because this is where I come home to when I come to see my family.
Well, no wonder you are not afraid to buy your $94 ticket to New York and kind of just pack up and move. You have kind of been used to transitions your whole life. And we had left off here on Good Things, Jenny, your transition from New York back to Mississippi or back to the South. You can tell us what year that was, trying to just regroup and figure out what was next for you. What was going on inside? I mean, it feels like you had landed, the career of a lifetime, but you felt like that maybe there was more or something different.
So I was at Broadway.com for 6 years, and then I had a moment of, okay, I need to figure out if I'm staying here or if I'm going to move on, or just the job had plateaued. And so I needed to figure out what was next for me. And I was nervous, but I basically just quit my job which I am apparently known to do, because that's what I did when I was at Circle Line too. Once I got that Broadway.com job, I just quit it. I think I'm pretty, gung ho about my career. So if there's a roadblock, I will figure out how to get around it. So I came home for about a month and I wallowed a little bit and cried a little bit. And I was like, what am I going to do? And then I pretty much emailed every single human being I've ever come into contact with and said, I'm a freelance photographer now. Please hire me. So once I went back to New York after that little month of wallowing, I haven't stopped working since. I've been a freelancer ever since then, and mainly in theater, but I also shoot for ABC, television. I shoot for Getty Images. I've been trying to do a little bit more photography down south when I'm home. I'm picking back up that photography that I started doing, which is the rural life. And during COVID, I came home for 3 months and was just home with my parents. It was crazy. I'm 37 now, so I was like 36 then, and I was living at home with my parents, just me and my mom and dad. And I started this project where I drove around to people's homes and would take pictures of them on their porch because of social distancing and everyone being quarantined. And so I have like 100 photos of Southerners on their porches. And I was in Mississippi and Tennessee and Alabama and kind of Kentucky, all over. And so I would like to do something with that moving forward, but still Broadway is my number one love, but the South is a very, very close second. So I'm hoping to continue that.
It's funny you bring up the porch photos, Jenny, because that was kind of like a big trend. And if I remember correctly, you may have even started that here in Mississippi, and it got all the way down to Central. And I had my own. It was a crouch by the couch photo because we didn't have the pretty porch photos. And I was just woke up. My hair looked like crap. My 2 kids had found me. I was crouched by the couch trying to drink my coffee. And I was like, I see all your pretty.
I love that.
Well-washed photos on your front porch, but here I am in my 3-day jammies just trying to drink coffee crouched by the couch alone. Yeah, that was it. But that was a very interesting time, but interesting time for Broadway too. I mean, it's a little bit, to think about the stars aligned in a way to at least give you an opportunity beyond Broadway because the pandemic. I mean, your world would have been rocked had you still been there.
It was pretty scary. Yeah. I mean, I was there the day everything shut down, which was March 13th, I believe. I had 3 jobs lined up that day, and, they slowly were all canceled. And once that day hit, Broadway was shut down for 1.5 years that day. And we didn't know that. We were told 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and obviously it got worse and worse. And it was a pretty wild time. It seems like it was yesterday, but it also seems like it was 10 years ago. But I essentially didn't have a job for 1.5 years. And not only not having a job, like I said before, the Broadway community is very small and we're all friends and we're all chosen family. So I didn't have that community for 1.5 years. And I did something similar before I did the porch photos. I did these virtual sessions through the computer with Broadway stars. So, and I was about 30 days into the pandemic because I stayed in New York. I stayed in New York for the first 4 months, and I didn't leave my very tiny apartment in Harlem. And but I was getting a little stir crazy about 30 days in. I was like, I need to take photos of something. I'm now to the point where I need to do it. So I just texted a bunch of my Broadway friends and I said, hey, get on Zoom with me and let's chat. And we talked. I would take their picture. I'd post it on Instagram, and that's what I did. I did 135 of them, I think. And then that's where the porch photos came later. But yeah, you're right. That was a big trend. Everybody was trying to find a way to create something good and create art and just, relieve their soul.
Try to make sense.
That's what it did for me. So
yeah, just try to make sense of a very, confusing time. But you mentioned Instagram. Sure. I've stalked you there, and you put up wonderful photos. Awesome. So if folks are listening to good things, Jenny, and they're like, oh, I need more of her art. I need to see what she's up to. Or I know you're for hire as well. Where can we connect with you?
I'm Jenny Anderson Photo on Instagram. I also have a website that's also Jenny Anderson photo.com. But I'm pretty good about responding. Just slip into those DMs on Instagram and I'll definitely respond. But yeah, that's where I post most of my new work. So that's where you can find me.
Of all the photos you taken, is there one that came across your lens and you went, oh, I got to do that?
Yeah. So in the theater world, because I have a couple of answers to that question that are different. But if we're talking Broadway specifically, and it's in my show, there's this photo of Glenn Close when she was in the revival of Sunset Boulevard, which is a show that she originated, I'm going to say about 20 years ago. I don't know the exact year. So, but she revived it again a couple of years ago. And I went backstage and shot the whole show, getting ready before, but specifically her in her dressing room. And she was very lovely and really quiet and kind of stoic. And she just was the coolest and let me take photos of her the whole night. And she kept calling me photographer, but I was into it. It was fine. But
well,
that
been so
is my favorite.
To this conversation, Jenny, I could talk to you on and on. If you're ever in the central area, please stop by the studio. We will be keeping up with all things that Jennifer Aniston does here in Mississippi. Just kidding.
Sure.
Jenny Anderson, and if only, hey, you never know. We put it out there and you'll make it happen.
We will.
But yeah, it was so nice to meet you. Thank you for your time.
Oh my God, you too, Rebecca. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right. And you guys stick with us, though. We got a few more good things for you coming up next.